wonderful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and recent activities.
All the countries are listening.
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us here for the first time for HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. and on Saturday mornings and afternoon at 3 p.m. As always, at the top of the hour, let me thank you for your generous calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on HCC TV Dialogue Houston, but particularly your great ideas for topics, guests, and subjects to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston. For after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show proudly now in its 29th year. We start our 30th season in January. I have a great show lined up for you today with a guest that we've had on before, been a while now, and she's going to talk about a subject that probably today, in the environment in which we find ourselves, in the context in which we're living, is probably more needed than anything else that we could talk about. And that's love. Lovescaping is the title. And our guest is Irene Graves. So before I bring on Irene, let me just see if I can frame it a little bit. Before we started taping, we were talking about how important this aspect of love is. And I was saying to Irene that the thing that got me through my education in segregated, racist Orange, Texas, growing up with the Klan, was that I had teachers, both white and black, nuns and lay people, who gave me unconditional love, who saw potential in the child, who saw potential in the boy, and gave him unconditional love. In the giving and receiving of that unconditional love, in that environment of unconditional love, I didn't just only survive, I didn't even just thrive, I flourished. And it's all about human flourishing. And anything we can do to help the human being to flourish to the fullness of their God-given potential is what we must do. And each child that we're encountering now in the educational system, particularly the child of poverty, particularly the child who comes from the socioeconomic backgrounds that we all talk about, but doing little to change and to eradicate, that love becomes a very important component of their survival. Just their basic survival. And so we're moving toward more understanding that love is something that truly talks about accepting the other human being as an equal human being, not just tolerating their existence, but accepting. Our good friend Irene has been working in this arena for many, many years. The project, the program, the concept, the context, and the text of her program on lovescaping is profound. It is really about a social emotional learning approach to the practice of love in action. With that said, enough. Irene, welcome.
Thank you, Larry. It's always such an honor and a pleasure to be with you and share this space and talk about love. And I love how you framed it, because love is a basic human need. And we have forgotten that. And I see as the root of the issue, not only in our education system, but in our world, in our society, truly the root of the is absence of love. And absence of love results in all the structural systemic that we see, ranging from racism to inequality to poverty. And when we think about our students walking into our classrooms every day, let's imagine they're carrying this invisible backpack that rarely gets addressed, right? Of trauma, of stress, of adversity, of grief. And now we know so much more about our development and about our brains and about what is optimal for learning. And we know that when a child doesn't feel safe, we know that when a child doesn't feel heard, doesn't feel like they belong, doesn't feel loved, essentially, that child will be unable to learn. And so truly, love, being loved and feeling loved is a prerequisite to learning. And as you said, it's not just about getting through school and surviving. Our educational system should be in the business of allowing every child to flourish, as you said. And so I believe that the whole educational system needs to be transformed, not reformed, but transformed. And that the biggest and most urgent need in our world right now is actually learning to love. And I propose this framework, this philosophy, this way of life called lovescaping, which is rooted in the belief that love is not just an emotion or a feeling, but most importantly, love is an action. And we can actually learn to love. And we can learn to love when we are taught what love is. And so lovescaping is a framework that I've developed based on my life experience working and living with different communities around the world. I am originally from Venezuela, but I've had the great privilege and opportunity to live in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in Central America, always working in education and community development. And I learned that love transcends all differences. And so when I looked at those experiences, what allowed us to become one, what allowed us to love one another, I saw that there were commonalities, there were these ingredients, and that's how lovescaping came about. These, I call them the pillars, the 15 pillars that make love in action possible. And they're all universal values, I would say. And they are respect, care, honesty, communication, empathy, trust, patience, compassion, liberation, humility, vulnerability, solidarity, hope, gratitude, and forgiveness. Now, imagine if every child that went to school had a class where they learned to embody and practice each one of these pillars, where they would learn how to love themselves, how to take care of themselves, how to be empathetic, how to be compassionate, how to be forgiven, how to practice solidarity. That would change our world. And that's what the work that I've been doing over the past 3 years here locally in Houston, delivering this curriculum, this program in schools, in public schools. All my schools are Title I schools. And the need for love and the need to rehumanize education is an urgent need in our system.
What has been the response and reaction in the schools that you have worked from the teachers, students, and parents? Because I would think that once they grasp the fullness of this lovescaping formula and context, they would have to see so many pieces of the puzzle that affect their daily lives, not just when it comes to their children and education. So what has been some of those responses and comments?
The idea is that we turn all the learning communities, not just the students, but the entire learning community into a lovescaping community. And so our students, our families, our teachers become lovescapers. And what does that mean? That they are transformed through these values and they see the benefit. You know, it's amazing because I've seen even the most skeptical teachers when we've started this program, you know, to really, a lot of it is transitioning from fear to love. Because when we look at our world and our system, a lot of organizations are rooted in fear, right? Even our parenting style sometimes are, you know, you act, if you don't do what I'm saying, you threaten, you manipulate, you use fear to control. And it works up until a certain point. It's never sustainable. And it's not, people don't flourish and thrive under fear, right? People are just,
Right.
You're complicit, you just comply because you're afraid. And so when you teach and you show that there's a different way to establish mutual respect. This is not about having power over the students or power over your children. This is about seeing each other as human beings, as equals, as human beings that are intrinsically dignified and that deserve to be treated with love and respect. And so when you learn to communicate using nonviolent communication, when you learn to know, not judge and to not assume, but to really try to listen and understand. When you learn to listen without the intent to respond, but with the intent to understand, that changes everything. I'll give you a few stories. I had one particular teacher that I'm thinking of now, who was extremely skeptical at the beginning of the school year when we started Lovescaping. And he was a math teacher, and he would say, why do I have to do this Lovescaping thing? I'm a math teacher, I this is not my thing. And slowly, as we went through our pillars, and I use a whole methodology where we really build community. We sit in a circle. We get to express our feelings and emotions. We get to be vulnerable. We get to learn how to express our needs and learn to ask for what we need to create safe environments, to be trauma informed. And when he started using some of those tools in his classroom with his students, there was one instance, we were during the pandemic when we were all virtual, and none of the students wanted to turn on their cameras. This was a big issue that a lot of teachers struggle with. And one day, he became vulnerable with his students, and he started expressing his needs and how he felt when they didn't turn their camera on. And when he expressed his need, all the cameras started turning on, and he couldn't believe it. And he calls me up until this day, and he said, you know what? Lovescaping changed my life, not only in my school with my students, but with my family at home. Now I have this different language, this different way of talking with my spouse and with my children. And that is powerful when we are given that space to heal, Larry, because there's so much pain that we need to heal as human beings. When schools allow to form that space, when we can open up our hearts and express our pain and also our joys, but when we heal, then you are able to flourish. And so I have witnessed the transformation of students from witnessing their body language at the first class where they don't even want to make eye contact, their shoulders are slumped, they maybe speak one word the entire class, to eventually opening up and flying, becoming a butterfly, essentially. That cocoon opens up because they feel loved. It's what you were saying. You grew up with unconditional love in your schools. And that's what I'm trying to do as well, to let the teachers know, and the administrators and the families, that, love is what we need to become the best version of ourselves. And so it requires a lot of unlearning, and it requires a lot of intentionality. So we can't leave it up to luck, and we can't assume that you will just pick up love along the way, or that you're going to get it at home, because not every child has that opportunity. Exactly.
Nothing happens without trust.
Exactly.
So if I begin those relationships, then I have the ability to begin, as you so well eloquently said, to ask for what I need.
Yeah.
Part of this whole thing, as you were talking, I've always seen it spelled out with adults, children, teenagers, is the ability to feel safe enough, to trust enough that you can ask for what you need.
Exactly.
And that it not will be laughed at or poo-pooed or disregarded or thinking you're crazy or whatever, because we don't take the time anymore to develop those relationships. Exactly. In this fast-paced world, the technology world, this is not, you can't, the unconditional love that I'm talking about going back 50 years, 60 years, was done face to face, eyeball to eyeball, with the words you use, intentionality and mindfulness. I could hear and see the tonality inflection in your voice. I could see and hear that change. I could see your eyes sparkle or get sad or get dim. It is an encounter with another human being. It is that one-on-one encounter with another human being. And so if we can bring that back together in the way you so wonderfully crafted and put together Lovescaping with the pillars and sitting in those circles, there's magic that always happens in circles. Absolutely. Human beings sitting in a circle is always a magical thing. To begin to experience the other as the other, not otherness, but as the other human being who is the same as me, different but the same, but the same as me, begin to experience the other as a human being then we can do it with civility. We can do it with humanity and begin to grow and learn from each other.
You saying those words, it brings up to me Ubuntu, which has been a very big influence in my life. I learned about this Southern African way of life, again, philosophy that translates to a person is a person through persons. It's often translated as I am because you are. So actually in Ubuntu, there is no other. There is no other, because we are all interconnected, interdependent, and my humanity and my existence is inextricably tied to yours. And so when we come together and realize that my actions, right, affect, there's a ripple effect, and whether that's, you know, for good or for bad, every action will have consequences. And when we teach kids from a young age, right, how to live in community, how to put ourselves in other people's shoes, right, how to, you know, how to not judge, how to really embrace a human being. Like you said at the beginning, I've never liked the word tolerance either, because I think that's such a low bar. I mean, I don't want to be tolerated. I don't think any human being wants to be tolerated.
No, I tolerate the roaches, the ants, mosquitoes, and the heat. I don't want to tolerate the same level of human beings.
Exactly. And so when we shift that and we learn to embrace and love one another, not you know, despite our differences, but because of our differences, it's amazing what we can accomplish, because I have witnessed, not only in my classes right now with Lovescaping in schools, but throughout my life, Larry, and you have too, all of us who know that love is the answer. We know what love does to a human being and how needed it is and how a human being flourishes when they are loved. And so I think it's a lot of going back to what are our values, and what is the purpose of schooling, and what is the purpose of education. And so if the purpose of education is to go and learn how to take a test so that you can get your scores up and you're good at taking a test, I don't know how that has any relevance to the world of the 21st century or the challenges of our 21st century, right? And we live in an increasingly diverse world, but an increasingly polarizing world where, like you said, we do not, you know, we don't have civil debates or discussions. And, you know, this week I was having very interesting debates with my students. We were talking about respect, and we were modeling what a respectful discussion looks like when there's disagreement. And I was telling one of my students, you know, I disagree with your point of view, but I respect you and I want to hear you out. And it was amazing the shift that happened where this particular student felt heard. He acknowledged and he realized that his point wasn't being agreed upon by a lot of the other students, but he felt safe enough to express it and then listen to the other point of view. And that's how we build bridges, by listening and being humble and knowing that we are here to learn. You know, I think the Maya Angelou's adage, if we lived by that, do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better. I mean, that is humility in a nutshell. This idea that the fact that I've been doing something my whole life or a certain way doesn't mean that I can't change it. If there's a better way, if I was raised in one way, but then I learned, you know what, this is a different way. This is a way that maybe it's harder work because it takes more time, right? To be intentional about being patient and compassionate and empathetic. It's definitely much more work than fear. It's definitely much more time consuming, but you know what? It's the most worthwhile work there is because it is what makes us human. And so it's also being open to this unlearning and learning and adopting different ways, and not just be set in our own ways, but trying to expand our mind and say, you know what? Look at ourselves. Let's look at ourselves. Let's hold that finger that we so willingly point to others. It's so easy to blame, right? You were talking about the blaming game before. Why don't we direct that finger towards yourself and self-reflect and become more self-aware and try to think, how can I more intentionally be more solidary, more honest, more trustworthy, more humble. And it's work. It's work, Larry, but it's what makes us human.
Are we willing to do our own work and be honest with ourselves first? It seems to me part of the block, part of the hesitancy, part of the unwillingness to look at love or to examine love or even talk about love or unconditional love is that I have to admit some things to myself about myself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that I may not be willing to do. So it's easier to keep this mask, to keep this false front, this false image, that I'm okay, I'm intact, I'm strong, I don't need this. This love stuff is weak. I don't want to even go there. But what I've always learned when you ask adults, as a child when you were in school, particularly elementary school or middle school, who was that number one person that you remember, that teacher, that made a difference in your life? And I've seen grown people, grown men tear up because as soon as they start thinking about that teacher in their lives who cared about them, who loved them, who tried to understand them, and made a profound difference into their lives to be and become the adults that they are today.
Exactly.
So it does work. And we all have that person.
Yes.
We all can name that person. And what did that person give but truly unconditional love?
I've been working with youth, with children, you know, K through 12, and I look at especially our boys, because so much, you know, we have all these kind of very toxic masculinity standards and what it means to be a man and what it means to be. And so this whole kind of putting a mask on and toughening up is even worse for boys. I mean, we suffer from it too, but almost every culture socializes, especially, you know, men, boys into, you know, toughen up, man up, don't show your feelings. That's a sign of weakness. And I am 100% certain, Larry, that if we provided lovescaping spaces, these circles, these vulnerable spaces to express our pain or hurt, to be hurt, as you know, for everybody, but in particularly for boys, the violence in the world would decrease exponentially, because so much of that aggressiveness and that violence comes from unaddressed hurt and pain that we've never processed. And especially when you don't learn, when you don't express all your feelings, especially the sadness, it bottles up, and the only available emotion that is out there for boys is anger. That's the only, you know, manly enough emotion to express, that it's socially acceptable to express. And that often leads to aggression and violence. And so I have had, you know, middle school boys cry in class, talking about their struggles and their pain and what they're going through. And that is so important, because that heals, to put it out and to know that you're not alone and that we're here with you. And what happens is the children start noticing, oh, me too. You know, I also have, you know, issues and situations that I haven't, that are painful, and I'm not alone in my pain. And we connect over that. And we also connect over the joys, you know, but I think we ignore, you know, we don't address that part of our humanity, which is such a big part, right? We are, you know, human beings that experience all emotions, from love and joy to anger, to pain, and so I think we need to have these spaces in our schools where we're intentionally cultivating through our actions, not just in a word of the day, word of the month, announcement, no, but we are actually modeling what that looks like through our body language, like you said, the gaze, the tone. How do we come together? How do we call people in when there has been a harm that's been done, instead of pushing kids out? Oh, you made a mistake, you said a bad word, we are going to be expelled. Well, how is that teaching and learning? Why don't we call people in and say, you know what? I felt hurt by your words, and this is how they affected me. So you learn to take responsibility also for your actions and your words. That's teaching and learning. And so I think we've failed. We are failing as a society in teaching how to resolve conflict, how to build healthy relationships. And so that's the goal for Lovescaping, to that every child goes to school and can be loved and can learn to love themselves and practice love in action.
It's so important because without the teaching of that at an early age, without understanding how to counter some of your machismo inclinations, how to even treat young ladies and treat girls and women, leads to the ending results of adults becoming trapped in the circle. It ends up expressing itself in domestic violence. You know, I've seen this in young men who failed to learn to read. And so they take out their frustration now as an adult, with the inability to be able to read, and some even cases even to write. They take out that frustration and anger on everyone around them.
Yes.
Because the system failed them.
Exactly.
The system failed them not only in their ability to read and write, but the system also failed them by not having something like Lovescaping to show how the expressions of your emotions, that it's not only okay, it's important. It is necessary to your whole growth and development. Yes, you need to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic and everything else that goes with that, but you also need to learn these other skills.
Exactly.
And the soft skills, as we've always said, we've even learned it now in corporate life. Without EI, emotional intelligence, we used to, now it's, oh no, we need that. We need that. But we need to start teaching it now with young people and kids in school.
I hope that, Lovescaping can continue to grow and that we can become a core component of our educational system so that schools become places where we systematically and intentionally cultivate love in action.
Well, I think that's where we're going to have to leave it for now because we're out of time, but it really is something that we all need to understand and practice more. I would love to see Lovescaping in all our schools, public, private, parochial, charter. I would love to see Lovescaping in our churches. I think Lovescaping could do wonderful things in Sunday school classes of every denomination. When I say church, parish, temple, synagogue, or mosque, to reach all the young people, because the churches have it in pieces and components, and some of the activities and programs they have, but they don't have it as well put together in a systematic way that you have laid out. So if you want to reach Irene, it's very easy to find, www.lovescaping.org. Go to her website. I think you'll be fascinated and contact her, because I think that in the absence of, she says, the absence of love in our systems, the absence of caring, the reason we don't have caring in our systems, because we have no concept of what it means to fully love and embrace the other human being as a human being with acceptance. And so the other becomes this thing rather than a human being.
Exactly.
As long as I can keep you in the thing category without having to deal with any emotions related to how I think about you or treat you, then that's easy. But once I open that door to see you as a full human being, just like I am, with the same hurts, desires, wants for our children, we have to now do dialogue. We have to come in conversation. We have to engage with each other. We have to begin to have some sympathy, empathy. We have to talk about equity. We have to talk about all those things that no one really wants to talk about.
Exactly.
And in this divided world that we're in right now, there is no gray. There's either black and white. We got to get the gray. There's blue and purple. Blue and red. We got to get the purple. There is a middle ground. There's a way out. And the way out starts with love and unconditional love. Irene, I can't thank you enough for being our guest this week. We look forward to your work. We look forward to following your work. We look forward to helping you in your work, because I really think you're onto something here. And it's so great to have you on the show again, talking about Lovescaping.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
All right, we'll be in touch. All right, until then, as always, to all of you, we look forward to you joining us in future segments of Dialogue Houston. Thank you for being with us today. And until then, please be well, be safe, and peace, power, and love.